The story opens with the heavy rhythmic crack of Judge Eleanor Price's gavel echoing through Courtroom 4B like a countdown to catastrophe. The air is thick with institutional authority, the kind that doesn't care about truth, only compliance. The narrator establishes the stakes immediately. Aaliyah wasn't just defending herself against false charges, she was standing in the crosshairs of a system designed to break people exactly like her. The hook builds through physical contrast and spatial power dynamics. Officer Paul Whitman stands near the bailiff station, arms crossed, occupying space with the casual dominance of someone who's never faced consequences. Aaliyah sits at the defense table in a borrowed suit jacket, hands folded, spine straight despite the tremor in her fingers. The visual tells the story before a word is spoken. Institutional power versus individual dignity. The narrator frames the central tension through proximity and threat. Whitman didn't see an honors student with everything to lose. He saw an obstacle between corrupt men and a lucrative real estate deal, one he'd been paid to remove. The introduction establishes the emotional core. This isn't random. It's calculated. And in exactly 3 minutes, Whitman will make the mistake that transforms local corruption into a federal case. The pacing mirrors the competitor's atmospheric dread, heavy, deliberate, building pressure, while personalizing it through the specific dynamics of a courtroom where the outcome was decided before Aaliyah ever walked through the doors. 3 weeks earlier, Aaliyah Carter had been accepted to Princeton with a full academic scholarship. She'd opened the email in her grandmother's kitchen, the same kitchen where 4 generations of their family had celebrated victories and mourned losses. Grandma Constance had cried, then made sweet potato pie, then called every relative within 3 states. Aaliyah's father had flown in from D.C. for the weekend, pride radiating from every hug. "You're going to change the world, baby girl," he'd said, hands on her shoulders. "Just like your mama would have wanted." Now, sitting in her AP government class, Aaliyah studied the Constitution with renewed focus. Article 1. Article 2. The checks and balances her teacher droned about. She believed in it. Believed that laws protected people. Believed that justice was real. After school, she drove home carefully, 10 miles under the limit, full stops at every sign, because her grandmother's 2008 Honda was the only car they had, and Aaliyah couldn't afford to mess up. The house sat on the corner of Magnolia and 5th, a modest craftsman with a wraparound porch and a garden Grandma Constance had tended for 43 years. The neighborhood was changing. Luxury condos rising 3 blocks over. Coffee shops replacing corner stores. And every few weeks, a man in an expensive suit would knock on their door with an offer. $500,000, Mrs. Banks? Today. Grandma Constance's answer never changed. "This house ain't for sale. My husband built this porch with his own hands. My daughter took her first steps in that living room. You can offer me $10 million, answer still no." The men always left smiling. Like they knew something she didn't. Aaliyah pulled into the driveway and saw her grandmother on the porch, watering the azaleas. 74 years old and still moving like she had work to do. "How was school, baby?" "Good, Grandma. Got an A on my calculus exam." "Course you did." Grandma Constance smiled. "Your daddy called. Says he's proud of you." Aaliyah climbed the steps, kissed her grandmother's cheek, and headed inside to start her homework. She had 3 weeks left before graduation. 3 weeks before Princeton. 3 weeks before her real life began. She didn't know she had less than 48 hours before everything would fall apart. The tail light wasn't broken when Aaliyah left for school that morning. She checked, habit from her father's training. "Black kids don't get warnings," he told her years ago. "We get escalations. So you check your lights. You signal every turn. You give them nothing." But when Officer Paul Whitman pulled her over at 4:47 p.m. on Tuesday, he pointed to the shattered red plastic like he'd discovered a crime scene. "Step out of the vehicle," Whitman said before she could even produce her license. Aaliyah's hands went cold. "Officer, I can explain." "Out. Now." She complied, legs shaking, trying to remember everything her father taught her. Hands visible. Voice calm. "Don't argue. Don't resist." Whitman circled the car like a predator. 6'2", 240 pounds of muscle and authority. He'd been with Oak Creek PD for 12 years, had 47 commendations, and exactly 0 sustained complaints because complaints died in internal review. "You know why I stopped you?" Whitman asked, though it wasn't really a question. "The tail light." "But sir, it wasn't broken this morning." "So you're saying I'm lying?" The trap snapped shut. Aaliyah felt it. "No, sir. I'm just saying." "License and registration." She handed them over with trembling fingers. Whitman studied her license and something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Or confirmation. Aaliyah Carter, he said slowly. Magnolia and Fifth? Her stomach dropped. Yes, sir. Whitman smiled. Returned to his cruiser. And Aaliyah stood on the roadside for 7 minutes, watching traffic pass, each car a witness that didn't stop. When Whitman returned, he had his body cam position just right. The angle that would show compliance but not aggression. I'm going to need to search your vehicle, he said. I smell marijuana. I don't smoke. I don't do drugs. I'm an honor student. Then you've got nothing to worry about. Whitman opened her door. Wait here. Aaliyah watched him search. Glove box. Under seats. Center console. His movements weren't investigative, they were performative. Like he was following a script. Then he crouched near the passenger side, blocked from view by the car door. When he stood, he was holding a small plastic baggie with white powder. Well, Whitman said loud enough for the body cam. Looks like we've got a problem. Aaliyah's vision blurred. That's not mine. I've never seen that before. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Please, I'm telling the truth. The handcuffs bit into her wrists. And as Whitman guided her toward his cruiser, Aaliyah caught his reflection in the window. He was still smiling. Judge Eleanor Price had a conviction rate of 94%. She wore her gray hair in a severe bun, her robes like armor, and her reputation like a crown. In Oak Creek, Judge Price didn't just enforce the law, she was the law. Defense attorneys called her the guillotine, because once the trial started, the outcome was already decided. Aaliyah's public defender was a tired man named Gerald Chin who'd handled 83 cases this year and won 6. Plead guilty, he'd advised during their 10-minute consultation. We can probably get probation. Maybe community service. But I didn't do it, Aaliyah had whispered. Chin had looked at her with exhausted sympathy. Doesn't matter, kid. Not in this courtroom. Now, sitting at the defense table while Judge Price reviewed the prosecution's evidence, Aaliyah felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. Her grandmother sat in the gallery, hands clutched around a Bible. Her father had wanted to come, but Aaliyah had begged him not to. He had important work in D.C. She could handle this. She had to believe she could handle this. The state calls Officer Paul Whitman, the prosecutor announced. Whitman took the stand with practiced ease. Raised his right hand. Swore to tell the truth. Then he lied. I observed the defendant driving erratically, Whitman testified. When I approached the vehicle, I detected the strong odor of marijuana. During a lawful search, I discovered a controlled substance in the center console in plain view. Aaliyah's fingernails dug into her palms. Chin stood for cross-examination. Officer Whitman, isn't it true that Ms. Carter has no prior arrests? No history of drug use? A 4.2 GPA and acceptance to Princeton. Objection, the prosecutor said. Character evidence is irrelevant to the facts of the case. Sustained, Judge Price said without looking up. Chin tried again. Did you test the substance immediately? Standard protocol is to submit to the lab. And has the lab confirmed it's an illegal substance? Whitman's jaw tightened. Results are pending. So you arrested my client based on a visual identification of a white powder that could be anything? Baking soda? Powdered sugar? I have 12 years of experience identifying. Objection. Your Honor, the defense is badgering the witness. Sustained. Mr. Chin, move along or sit down. Aaliyah watched her future crumble with every sustained objection. Every overruled defense motion. Every knowing glance between Judge Price and the prosecution. This wasn't a trial. It was theater. And she was the sacrifice. Your Honor, the defense requests the body cam footage from Officer Whitman's arrest of my client. Chen's voice carried a note of desperation, the last card of a losing hand. The prosecutor stood smoothly. Your Honor, unfortunately there's been a technical malfunction. The footage from that particular date has been corrupted and is unrecoverable. The courtroom went still. Aaliyah's head snapped up. That's not true, she said too loud. Judge Price's gavel cracked. Miss Carter, you will remain silent or be held in contempt. But Your Honor, Chin began. The prosecution has submitted documentation from the IT department confirming the technical failure, Judge Price continued. This court sees no evidence of malfeasance. Motion denied. Aaliyah's mind raced. She'd watched enough crime documentaries with her father to know body cam footage didn't just disappear. Files could be deleted, but they left traces. Recovery was possible with the right tools and the right technician. But Gerald Chin wasn't fighting. He was just nodding, accepting, moving on. Your Honor, in light of the missing evidence, I move for dismissal. Denied. The officer's testimony is sufficient. Do you have any other motions, Mr. Chin? Chin looked at Aaliyah. She could see the apology in his eyes. No, Your Honor. Then let's proceed to closing arguments. Aaliyah's grandmother made a sound in the gallery, a quiet, broken noise that cut deeper than any gavel. And Officer Whitman, standing near the bailiff's station, allowed himself the smallest smile. He'd done this before. Planted evidence. Deleted footage. Watched innocent people plead guilty because fighting was too expensive, too exhausting, too rigged. But he'd never done it to someone like Aaliyah Carter. He didn't know about her father. Didn't know about the man who'd spent 23 years investigating corruption. Who'd built cases against cartels, crime families, and corrupt politicians. Who was, at that exact moment, sitting in a surveillance van 3 blocks from the courthouse, listening to every word through the wire his daughter had agreed to wear. The trap wasn't for Aaliyah. It was for them. The prosecutor's closing argument was efficient and cruel. Ladies and gentlemen, the facts are simple. The defendant was found in possession of an illegal substance. Officer Whitman, a decorated veteran of our police force, conducted a lawful search and discovered evidence of criminal activity. The defense has offered nothing but character references and conspiracy theories. We must hold people accountable regardless of their GPA. Chen's closing was brief, almost apologetic. And then Judge Price spoke. I've heard the evidence. I find the defendant. Your Honor, I'd like to speak. The words left Aaliyah's mouth before her brain approved them. Chin grabbed her arm, but she stood anyway. Judge Price's face darkened. Miss Carter, you are not permitted. He's lying, Aaliyah said, voice shaking but clear. Officer Whitman planted that bag. The body cam footage didn't malfunction. He deleted it. And you know it because this entire trial is designed to pressure my grandmother into selling her property. The courtroom erupted. Judge Price's gavel fell like thunder. You are in contempt, bailiff. I watched him plant it. Aaliyah's voice rose above the chaos. The angle of his body. The way he positioned himself. He blocked the camera view deliberately. And then he smiled at me. He smiled because he knew no one would believe. The slap came from nowhere. Officer Whitman had crossed the courtroom in 3 strides. His palm connected with Aaliyah's face with enough force to spin her head sideways. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The room froze. Aaliyah's cheek burned. Her ears rang. But she didn't fall. Didn't cry. Just stood there, hand pressed to her face, staring at Whitman with something beyond fear. Recognition. You just assaulted me in front of a federal judge, Aaliyah said quietly. In a court of law. On record. Whitman's face went white. Judge Price stood, mouth open. Chin grabbed Aaliyah's shoulder. And the back doors of the courtroom burst open. Marcus Reynolds didn't walk into courtroom 4B. He materialized like divine intervention. 6'3", dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than Whitman's monthly salary, he moved down the center aisle with the measured precision of someone who'd kicked down doors in 7 countries. The gold FBI badge clipped to his belt caught the fluorescent light. Nobody move, Marcus said, voice carrying absolute authority. This courtroom is now a federal crime scene. Judge Price found her voice. Excuse me, who do you? Assistant Director Marcus Reynolds, Federal Bureau of Investigation. He pulled his credentials, held them up. And that young woman Officer Whitman just assaulted in your courtroom? That's my daughter. The silence was total. Whitman's hand drifted toward his service weapon. Marcus's eyes tracked the movement. I wouldn't, Marcus said softly. 6 federal agents are currently positioned in this building. You touch that gun, you won't make it 3 steps. Whitman's hand froze. Marcus approached the defense table. Aaliyah stood there, cheek still red, trying not to shake. He touched her shoulder gently. You okay, baby girl? She nodded. Marcus turned to face the courtroom. Judge Price, I'm formally notifying you that this proceeding is suspended pending a federal investigation into civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Officer Whitman, you're under arrest for assault, deprivation of rights under color of law, and obstruction of justice. You can't just, Judge Price sputtered. You have no jurisdiction. Actually, Your Honor, I have 17 separate violations of federal law committed in this courtroom in the last 40 minutes. I've been listening the whole time. Marcus pulled out his phone, played a recording of the prosecutor's voice. The footage from that particular date has been corrupted and is unrecoverable. Digital forensics is going to love this, Marcus continued. Because body cam footage doesn't just disappear. It gets deleted. By someone with access and motive. Whitman bolted. He made it 4 steps before 2 agents in tactical gear emerged from the side entrance and put him face down on the courtroom floor. Cuffs clicked. Rights were read. And Aaliyah Carter, honors student, Princeton-bound scholar, watched her father dismantle an entire corrupt system with the same calm precision he'd once used to teach her how to ride a bike. Judge Price sat down heavily. Because in that moment she understood. Her career, her reputation, her freedom, all of it was about to be examined under a federal microscope. And this family didn't break. They built cases. The FBI's mobile forensics lab arrived at Oak Creek Police Department at 11:47 p.m. Special Agent Sarah Chin, no relation to Aaliyah's public defender, was a digital archaeologist. She could resurrect deleted files, trace digital fingerprints, and reconstruct data that suspects thought they'd buried forever. The body cam footage took her 43 minutes to recover. Marcus watched the playback on a secure monitor, Aaliyah beside him. Her grandmother had finally been convinced to go home, but Aaliyah had refused to leave. She needed to see this. Needed to watch her vindication load pixel by pixel. The timestamp read 4:52 p.m. Tuesday. The traffic stop. Whitman's voice, I'm going to need to search your vehicle. I smell marijuana. The camera showed Aaliyah's face, terrified, compliant. Then Whitman moved around the car. The angle shifted as he crouched near the passenger side. For 3 seconds his body blocked the lens. When he stood he had the baggie. Rewind that, Marcus said. Frame by frame. Chin isolated the sequence. Enhanced the resolution. And there it was, Whitman's left hand reaching into his pocket. The subtle transfer. The planted evidence appearing as if by magic. Got him, Chin said. But there's more. She pulled up the metadata logs. Showed Marcus the deletion timestamp, 9:23 p.m. that same night. The user ID, P Whitman_badge 427. He didn't even try to cover his tracks, Chin said. Just logged into the system and permanently deleted the file. Or so he thought. Marcus leaned back. What else did he delete? Chin's fingers flew across the keyboard. Let's find out. What they found was a pattern. 17 traffic stops over 8 months. 15 deletions. 12 arrests. And every single target lived within 4 blocks of Magnolia and 5th. Every single target had a grandmother, a parent, or a relative who owned property the city wanted. This isn't one bad cop, Marcus said quietly. This is a systematic campaign. Chin nodded. And the authorization to access and delete footage? That came from someone higher up the chain. Marcus pulled out his phone. Dialed a number he'd hoped never to use. It's Reynolds. I need a RICO task force in Oak Creek by morning. We're looking at citywide corruption. Yes, I'm sure. Because they made the mistake of targeting my daughter. He hung up. Aaliyah had been silent, watching the screens. Now she spoke. Dad, how many people did they do this to? How many people are in jail right now because... We're going to find out, Marcus said. Every case, every deletion, every lie. We're going to tear this whole thing apart. For the first time in a long while, stories like Aaliyah's don't end with the system winning. Sometimes they end with the system being held accountable, not because it's designed to be fair but because someone refused to accept the injustice. Mayor Richard Sterling held his press conference at 10 a.m. the next morning, before the FBI could control the narrative. He stood on the steps of City Hall, flanked by the police union president and 3 city council members. His silver hair was perfect. His suit was expensive. His expression was wounded righteousness. Yesterday, a federal agent abused his power in one of our courtrooms, Sterling began. Assistant Director Marcus Reynolds, acting not as an officer of the law, but as a father, disrupted legitimate legal proceedings to protect his daughter from facing the consequences of her actions. The cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. Now I understand a parent's love. I respect it. But we cannot allow personal relationships to override the rule of law. The charges against Aaliyah Carter are serious. Officer Paul Whitman is a decorated member of our police force with 12 years of exemplary service. And Judge Eleanor Price has presided over our municipal court with integrity for 2 decades. Sterling paused for effect. The FBI's investigation appears to be politically motivated. A federal overreach designed to undermine local law enforcement. And while I support accountability, I cannot support a witch hunt driven by family connections rather than evidence. In her grandmother's living room, Aaliyah watched the broadcast with mounting rage. He's lying, she said. They have the body cam footage. They have the deletion logs. Baby, let him talk, Grandma Constance said quietly. Let him dig. Marcus stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, listening to the same broadcast. His jaw was tight. Sir, I know what it looks like, he said into the phone. But the evidence is solid. This isn't about my daughter. It's about a pattern of corruption. Yes, I understand the optics. No, I won't recuse myself. This is my case. He hung up, and Aaliyah saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. Doubt. Dad. Marcus looked at his daughter. At his mother-in-law. At the house his wife had grown up in, the house corrupt men wanted to bulldoze for profit. They're trying to make this about me, he said. About bias. About a father protecting his child instead of an agent doing his job. So what do we do? Aaliyah asked. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who'd played this game for 23 years and knew every move. We let the community speak, he said. Because Sterling made one critical mistake. What's that? He assumed your neighbors would stay quiet. Mrs. Patricia Hughes was 72 years old and had lived on Magnolia Street for 53 years. She'd watched the neighborhood change. Watched families move in and out. Watched children grow up and move away. And she'd watched, 3 years ago, when Officer Whitman pulled over her grandson for a broken headlight and found a baggie of pills in his trunk. Pills her grandson swore weren't his. Now, sitting in her living room with an FBI agent, she told the story she'd been too scared to tell before. They wanted my house, Patricia said. Man came by 6 times. Kept raising the offer. When I said no the last time, he told me I'd regret it. 2 weeks later, Marcus, my grandson, got arrested. Lost his scholarship. Lost everything. The FBI agent, a young woman named Torres, took notes. Did you report this? To who? The police? Officer Whitman was the one who arrested him. Torres nodded. Mrs. Hughes, would you be willing to testify? Patricia's hands shook. But she nodded. If it helps that sweet Carter girl? Absolutely. 3 doors down, James Washington told a similar story. Traffic stop. Evidence. Deletion of body cam footage. And an offer on his mother's house that he'd refused. By noon, the FBI had 23 witness statements. By 3 p.m., local news had picked up the pattern. By 5 p.m., a crowd had gathered outside City Hall, not with pitchforks but with documents. Property offers. Arrest records. Medical bills from their children's legal troubles. Marcus stood before the crowd, badge visible, and let them speak. One by one they told their stories. The systematic targeting. The impossible choice. Sell your home or watch your child go to prison for crimes they didn't commit. The cameras captured everything. And Mayor Sterling, watching from his office window, realized his press conference had backfired spectacularly. Because this wasn't about one federal agent protecting his daughter. This was about an entire community that had been terrorized, and had finally found someone willing to listen. Aaliyah stood beside her father, watching neighbors she'd known her entire life share their pain. Mrs. Hughes squeezed her hand. You did good, baby, Patricia whispered. You stood up when we couldn't. Aaliyah felt tears sting her eyes. Not from sadness but from something deeper. Connection. Purpose. The understanding that her story wasn't just hers, it belonged to everyone who'd been silenced. The groundbreaking ceremony for Riverside luxury condominiums was scheduled for Saturday morning. Mayor Sterling had planned it months ago. Golden shovels, photo opportunities, a ribbon cutting to celebrate progress and urban renewal. The development company had already cleared 2 blocks. The 3rd block, Magnolia Street, was supposed to be empty by now. It wasn't. Sterling arrived at 9 a.m. with the developers, council members, and a carefully curated crowd of supporters. News cameras were positioned. Champagne was chilled. The FBI arrived at 9:03 a.m. Marcus Reynolds led a team of 26 federal agents across the construction site like a choreographed military operation. They carried warrants, boxes, evidence bags. Richard Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, racketeering, and deprivation of rights under color of law. Sterling's face went from confusion to rage to fear in 3 seconds. This is insane. You can't. We can. We have. Marcus gestured to the agents spreading across the site. Judge Eleanor Price, arrested 1 hour ago for obstruction of justice. Police Chief Warren, arrested 40 minutes ago for conspiracy. Officer Paul Whitman, already in federal custody. And now you. The developers tried to run. Agents cut them off. Handcuffs clicked in rapid succession. Sterling's lawyer started shouting about due process. Marcus handed him a 300-page indictment. The evidence includes 17 planted arrests, 42 deleted body cam files, 214 fraudulent property appraisals, and a paper trail connecting your office to every single illegal seizure. Your communications director kept excellent records. She's cooperating in exchange for immunity. Sterling's legs gave out. An agent caught him before he hit the ground. The crowd, the real crowd, the neighbors from Magnolia Street, watched in silence. Then Patricia Hughes started clapping. Slow. Steady. Others joined. The applause built until it echoed across the construction site like thunder. Aaliyah stood beside her grandmother, watching her father orchestrate justice with the precision of a symphony conductor. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. Grandma Constance squeezed her hand. "Baby, it's just beginning. They're going to rebuild this city right. And you're going to Princeton. And one day, you're going to be the one holding people accountable." Marcus approached them, loosening his tie. He looked exhausted and satisfied in equal measure. "All good?" he asked Aaliyah. She hugged him. "Art. Thank you, Dad." "You stood up first," Marcus said. "I just brought the backup." 3 months later, Aaliyah Carter walked across the stage at graduation. Valedictorian. Princeton bound. Unbroken. Her grandmother sat in the front row. Her father flew in from D.C. And in her speech, Aaliyah didn't talk about her arrest. Didn't mention the trial or the FBI or the corruption that had almost destroyed her future. She talked about systems. About the difference between law and justice. About how change happens when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. "We're taught that the system protects us," Aaliyah said. "But sometimes we have to protect the system from itself. Sometimes standing up means risking everything. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you have people who stand with you." The audience rose. The applause was deafening. And in the parking lot afterward, Marcus handed Aaliyah an envelope. Inside was a letter. "Princeton. Full scholarship. Plus a personal note from the dean. We're honored to welcome students who understand that education isn't just about knowledge, it's about courage." Aaliyah looked at her father. At her grandmother. At the community that had fought alongside her. "So," Marcus said, "ready to change the world?" Aaliyah smiled. "Already started. Because that's the thing about people like Aaliyah Carter. They don't wait for permission to demand justice. They don't accept corruption as inevitable. They stand up, even when the system is designed to make them fall. And sometimes, just sometimes, the system falls first.